Hello everybody. Today we'll be discussing on vaccination in special situations. I'll be discussing this from Indian Journal of Practical Pediatrics 2021 January March. Vaccination in special edition pages 29. Okay, so let's start. If somebody asks you what do you mean by vaccination in special situations means those places where vaccinating may not give a optimal immune response, or on the other hand even can cause adverse reactions. So those are called special situations, not where the patient is recovering from an illness or having some mild illness, or baby is on antibiotic therapy. These are not considered special situations. Okay, so I'll discuss most of the topics in this, but not all right. Vaccination during an acute illness, mild illness, go ahead with all vaccinations. There's no evidence to suggest that there's going to be a suppressed immune response. Moderate or severe acute illness, it is delayed until patient has recovered, not because it is going to give a suboptimal response, but it is because reaction secondary to vaccine can mask the primary illness characteristic. Like if the vaccination is going to cause a rash, or if the vaccination is going to cause a fever, then you do not know whether it is because of the primary illness or secondary to vaccination. Then your febrile convulsion, please go ahead and vaccinate. There's no contraindication for febrile convulsion. Guillain-Barre syndrome and vaccination, please go ahead and vaccinate. It is there is an increased incidence of GBS in influenza and meningococcal vaccine, but if you see the overall risk, it is very much less, and the benefits far outweigh the one or two cases of GBS that may occur secondary to vaccination. Then your rotavirus vaccine and intersusception. See, the recent published data, post-marketing surveillance does not show an increased incidence of intersusception secondary to rotavac. So yes, you can go ahead and vaccinate. Just a second. Sorry about that interruption. I had a patient and I had to go see them. Right. So I don't remember where we stopped exactly. I think we stopped with rotavirus and intersusception, right? So Rotavac does not seem to show any increase in intersusception in post-marketing surveillance one. Rotavirus, it's contraindicated basically if the patient has had a previous anaphylaxis to the vaccine or anaphylaxis to one of the components of the vaccine. An important point to remember here is the RV1 rotavirus vaccine contains latex in it, and latex allergy is common in spina bifida patients. So whenever you are trying to vaccinate a child who has a spina bifida, try vaccinating with RV5 and not with RV1. Then vaccination in a child with bleeding disorders. So any bleeding disorders, what are you going to do? So what the things that you can do are intramuscular vaccines can be given as subcutaneous vaccines. But please note that the opposite is not true. Never give a subcutaneous vaccine as an intramuscular vaccine. Okay, I'll repeat it again. An intramuscular vaccine can be given as a subcutaneous vaccine, but it's not true the other way around. And whenever you are giving vaccine, you can use a smaller gauge needle like a 23 gauge needle. And post vaccination, you can apply pressure for 5 to 10 minutes continuously. And if the patient is receiving products like your um, concentrates, factor 8 concentrates, then you can schedule the vaccination in such a way that it falls the day after they receive the concentrate, so that maximum coagulation factors will be running around in their system and it's easier to stop the bleeding. Having said all of this, always give a plan to the parents of the patient. In case such a thing like bleeding or increasing hematoma happens, they have to reach out to a health facility immediately. And if you are going to give a medication for pain or something, paracetamol will be the ideal medicine. Try to avoid NSAIDs. And paracetamol, again, you should use it cautiously in a patient with pre-existing liver disease. So this is about bleeding disorders. You can give an intramuscular dose subcutaneously, use a smaller gauge needle, apply pressure. If the patient is on coagulation factor concentrate treatment, schedule your vaccination the day after they receive the concentrate, and emergency action plan. Okay, and paracetamol SOS. Children with allergy. See, allergy, some urticaria, some itchiness. So those are all relative things, and I would not even say contraindications. It's more of a precaution. You'd monitor the child for 15 minutes, and that should be the case with any vaccination that you do. If the child has had an anaphylactic reaction to previous doses, anaphylactic reaction to one of the components in your vaccines, then it's a definite contraindication. You should not repeat the dose. Okay. And if the child has egg allergy, and if the egg allergy is a serious egg allergy like anaphylaxis, then what vaccines are contraindicated? It is only two: influenza and yellow fever. Previously they used to say MMR is contraindicated, but that is not the case, because MMR contains very little amount of egg protein, and the allergy component in your MMR is gelatin rather than your egg protein. So, a child with serious egg allergy like anaphylaxis, you will contraindicate influenza and yellow fever vaccine. If the patient has reactions to egg that is, you know, slightly more severe than rashes, but not anaphylactic range. Like the patient feels the throat is slightly closing in on them, has some amount of lip swelling, angioedema like presentation, lightheadedness. So these sort of things, the patient will receive vaccine only in a controlled setting, in a hospital setting, and the patient will ideally be observed for a reaction post vaccination. And MMR we discussed. Any hypersensitivity, child is at risk of allergic reaction for inactivated JE vaccine. Any allergic reaction, child is allergic to X, child is allergic to Y. When you are giving inactivated JE vaccine, be careful, because baby can be allergic to this too. So as far as allergy is concerned, this is a thing. Remember, serious egg allergy, your influenza and yellow fever is contraindicated. MMR is not contraindicated. Then vaccination in children with steroid therapy is the next topic. We can refer to the table on page 32. Nicely they have summarized. See, there is no stopping of your routine vaccination if the patient is on topical steroid therapy, if the patient is on local injectable steroid therapy, if the patient is on meter dose inhaler, if the patient is receiving physiological doses of corticosteroid, like replacement maintenance doses of steroids. So these are not contraindications for vaccination. Vaccination schedule will go as per schedule. Suppose the patient is on steroid, that is low or moderate dose of steroid. Patient is receiving it systemically. It can be daily dose or alternate dose. And the dose received by patient is less than 2 mg per kg per day of prednisone, or less than 20 mg per day in a child who's more than 10 kg, and the duration is less than 2 weeks. So in that case, the patient can receive all vaccines, okay, including live vaccines. Suppose the patient has received mm, more than 2 mg per kg per day, or more than 20 mg in a child who's more than 10 kg, but the duration is less than 2 weeks, then in that case, you can tell live vaccine can be given immediately after discontinuation. Some people even say give it after 2 weeks. Suppose the patient is receiving this more than 2 mg per kg or more than 20 mg for more than 2 weeks, 14 days or more, then in that case, after 4 weeks of completion of your steroid therapy, you can give live vaccine, not before that. All right. Then low or moderate dose systemic steroids who have a disease like SLE, and this SLE per se can suppress immune system. So in that case, during therapy, the child should not receive a live vaccine, and if at all it is indicated, discuss with a specialist and then give. Okay, so let's discuss steroids again shortly. So if the patient is on replacement dose of steroids, topical steroids, MDI steroids, local injectable steroid, there's no contraindication. If the patient is on low dose, which is less than 2 mg per kg in a less than 10 kg child, or less than 20 mg per day in a more than 10 kg child, and the duration that they have received is less than 2 weeks, go as per schedule. If the patient has received high dose steroid, more than 2 mg per kg or more than 20 mg in a more than 10 kg child, and the duration is less than 2 weeks, they can receive a live vaccine immediately after completion or maybe after 2 weeks of completion. If they have received this high dose steroids for more than 2 weeks, give live vaccine 4 weeks after completion of steroid therapy. So this is about your steroid. Then what else should we be discussing? Who are receiving chemotherapy? Chemotherapy, only vaccination that is advised is inactivated influenza. Hepatitis B can be given if the patient was unvaccinated previously. And during chemotherapy, no vaccine. 6 months after completion of chemotherapy, then you can give vaccine. Okay, so during and 6 months post chemotherapy, no vaccination will be given except inactivated influenza and hepatitis B if the patient was not previously vaccinated. After 6 months, vaccination will depend upon what the child has received previously. Prior to chemotherapy, whatever the vaccines are received, depending on that, your catch-up vaccination will be done. And one note about OPV is, see, oral polio vaccine should not be given to contacts of children on chemotherapy. If by mistake OPV was given to a household contact, it can be during routine immunization schedule, catch-up immunization, your pulse polio immunization, whatever it is. If the contact of this chemotherapy child has received an oral polio vaccine, isolate for 2 weeks. Isolate the person who has received the vaccine for 2 weeks, and then they can come into this household. Okay, until then isolation is important because polio virus gets excreted and they can spread. Then one of the most important topics, vaccination in a child with HIV. There's this table 3 on page 33, very nicely given. So vaccination for a HIV child, it's mostly same for asymptomatic child and a child without HIV, excepting oral polio vaccine. Okay, excepting oral polio vaccine. And in an asymptomatic HIV child, you will add polysaccharide pneumococcal vaccine to your conjugate vaccine. So these are the main two differences. And you will not give rotavirus vaccine. You will not give oral polio vaccine. Okay, rotavirus because there is still insufficient data to recommend. Oral polio vaccine is not given. It's not recommended by WHO, CDC or ACIP. Okay, you can give IPV. I will repeat it again. Vaccination in a HIV child, asymptomatic HIV child will be similar to that of any other child, except that the baby will not receive OPV, will not receive rotavirus, will additionally receive a polysaccharide pneumococcal vaccine. Okay, I think those are the main differences between a symptomatic HIV child and an asymptomatic HIV child. The child will not receive BCG. One, the child will not receive MMR if the CD4 count is less than 15% in a symptomatic HIV. I mean, hepatitis B, the schedule will be different. The child will receive 4 doses, 0, 1, 2, and 6. Okay, 4 doses, and they will be double dosage, and ideally the antibody titers should be checked. Then pneumococcal vaccine is going to be same for your asymptomatic and symptomatic HIV. They will receive additional polysaccharide doses. 2 months, first dose will be 2 months after your conjugate vaccine last dose, and second dose will be 5 years after the first dose. So basically 2 doses of polysaccharide vaccine will be given after completion of your 6, 10, 14 weeks and 15 months booster of PCV. Remember that. Then your varicella, again in a symptomatic child, you will give only if CD4 count is above 15% in a child less than 8 years. If CD4 count is more than 200 in a child more than 8 years. Okay, so these are the main differences between.
I found this on the web from.
I'm sorry. My Apple started speaking automatically. Right. So these are the differences. So between a normal child versus an asymptomatic HIV, what are the differences? Asymptomatic HIV child will not receive OPV, will not receive rotavirus, will additionally receive a pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine 2 doses. First dose will be 1 month after your PCV, and second dose will be at around 5 years of age. Okay, your symptomatic HIV versus a asymptomatic HIV. What are the differences? Symptomatic child will not receive BCG, will not receive MMR if CD4 count is less than 15%, will not receive varicella if CD4 count is less than 15% in a less than 8-year-old child and less than 200 in a more than 8-year-old child, will additionally receive hepatitis B 1 dose extra, um, and every vaccination will be double dosage of hepatitis B. So these are the significant differences. Okay, and similarly, household contacts of HIV children preferably should receive IPV, and HIV children also should receive IPV. And most of the setups, government setups now have IPV. There is standalone IPV available in private markets also. So there's nothing to prevent them from getting a polio vaccine. That's what I'm trying to tell. So that's about your HIV infection and vaccination. Vaccination in a child who's going to undergo splenectomy, ideally it should be given 2 weeks prior to splenectomy. Number one. Suppose it is missed. Suppose the doses were not given. Then don't give immediately after splenectomy. Give 2 weeks post splenectomy. The immune response is better that way. So remember that point. I think rest you will be able to read. Your primary immunodeficiencies and all are pretty simple. There's nothing for me to talk about to you guys. I think you will already know these things. So that's it. Hope this was useful to you. um, Read this article, listen to this lecture and read this article, and you'll be able to answer most of your theory question, and your OSCEs can carry questions from this article. So make sure you go through this article thoroughly in your IJPP 2021 January March. So thank you guys. Bye bye and all the best.